Welcome to the Call to Meat Scotland podcast, where we bring you the latest insights from across the Scottish red meat sector, from the public body that works on its behalf. I'm Claire Taylor, your host for today's episode. Join us as we dive into market trends, brand communications and industry development projects in relation to Scotland's red meat sector, featuring experts, guests, farmers and stakeholders. Together we'll explore the key facts and perspectives shaping our sector, keeping you informed and engaged with the ever-evolving landscape of the red meat industry. In this month's episode, we catch up with Cabinet Secretary Mairi Gougeon to hear her views on the past and future direction of agricultural policy. She's joined by QMS Chair Kate Rowell, and together they reflect on some of their highlights of working within the farming sector and share what they feel sets Scotland's red meat sector apart from others on the world stage. We also catch up with Sarah Millar and hear some of the amazing community engagement efforts happening in the red meat sector across the country. And Iain Macdonald has the monthly roundup of markets with lots of positive signals for producers. First up, I caught up with QMS Chief Executive Sarah Millar. Sarah, it's great to have you back on the episode. Last time we spoke, of course, not good weather in Scotland, but now we've had some lovely spring sunshine out in the fields right now. Lambing's hitting off in a really positive way. You've been very busy at your end, Sarah. What have you been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. It is nice for a change to be looking out in sunshine. Sowing has started about a month earlier than last year, maybe even actually earlier than that. So that's a much welcome change to what we had last year. So far anyway, recording this the last week in March. I will caveat that because this is a Scottish weather. So as usual, Claire, the wheel never stops here. The big things from the last couple of weeks, as part of our new strategy, one of the areas that we've upweighed in terms of our work is London activation and business development. You know, recognising that kind of southwest corner of England, where over the next 5 years we're due to see significant population growth. So whilst it's a buoyant market just now, it's a market that is probably going to grow over the next 5 years as well. So as part of that investment, we attended a new trade show for the first time, IFE. So that was last Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So the team were down there for 3 days. We did some work alongside Scotland Food and Drink and Seafood Scotland, doing a takeover with the chefs on the Monday. So it was really great to be able to talk about just why Scotch Beef, Scotch Lamb, specially selected pork are such great products to that, you know, particular audience of chefs, you know, alongside people like Tom Kitchen. So really, really targeting those high profile premium markets that are really, really important to the brands and to our producers in Scotland as well. So that was really exciting to see that come together, because obviously we're at the end of our first year of our new strategy, and we've been talking about that for a long time, but just because of timing that was when the show landed. So that's been really cool to do. We've also had some fantastic Monitor Farm Scotland events. I was just chatting to Peter, one of the regional advisors, when I came into the office this morning. So that they've tried what I think are really cool, innovative ways of undertaking knowledge exchange. So they've been doing a play in 3 parts of Scotland, and this is all around the family kitchen table. The play is designed to replicate a family conversation around a challenging topic, which is the inheritance tax changes. And instead of, you know, just having a panel session with an accountant, a banker and a lawyer, they basically replicate that conversation with a mother, you know, a daughter, a son and an advisor. And from the feedback I've seen, that it has kick-started lots of conversations, because it was a much more human way to actually talk about how difficult these things are. And then just last week they had On the Couch. This is QMS and the Monitor Farm Scotland's team answer to the Graham Norton show. So On the Couch with Blanche. This was up in Inverurie, and it was designed to be that positive conversation. They had some fantastic local farmers there who were all talking about actually what they've done in their businesses, why they feel so positive about the future, and then how they are using their local networks and experience to kind of grow their businesses as well. So yeah, that's been really, really cool to kind of watch that and see all that come together, because it is, you know, it's so easy to get yourself kind of, especially just now when there's yows lambing and cows calving, and it's a great time of year, but it can also be quite an isolating time of year. So it's been really good to see those events that we're on just coming up to lambing time to hopefully give people a bit of enthusiasm before we get into the hard work period, and then we'll come out the other side and we'll have the show season, which hopefully will be a sunny one this year.
And of course, lots of conversation at the moment, Sarah, about the SFI in England and what that's going to mean for farmers south of the border. What sort of conversations are you having with the Scottish Government, and what sort of message are you putting out in Scotland?
Yeah, so we've had quite a bit of work with Scottish Government conversations over the last few months, mainly relating to the declining cattle herd, because this is an issue that we've spoken about on this podcast before. It's not going away, it's not going to get any better. So as part of those conversations, we do talk about the role of support. And I often, will say that, we shouldn't call anything a subsidy, because it's a support, and it's support for investment in our sector. That's what it is. And we're in a very different place in Scotland. So this year, for the first time, there will be the whole farm plan that is brought in to IAC's time, which 15th of May is when all that kicks off. But apart from that, there's not the same fundamental change coming down the line for Scottish farmers. And the other thing is that there's been some quite severe caps put on to support claims for farmers in England as well that are not being replicated in Scotland. So it puts us in a very different position. I think long term, we need to make sure that the needs of Scottish farmers, when we look at that long term policy change, are being represented, and that the decision makers understand the complexity, because it is a complex operating environment that the Scottish farming exists within, as you know, Claire. And some of the things that might work elsewhere might not necessarily be the case in Scotland. And one of the things that we often talk about, and this again relates back to the cattle numbers issue, is not always demonising larger farms, because actually in Scotland, with Scotland's landscape, we've got our stratified, I can never say that word, stratified systems. We've got our hill ground, we've got our better ground. Part of what makes our Scottish mixed farming system work is that we have the ability to move animals across the country through a fantastic auction market system. That means that we are making the best use of our resources. But that also means, we need to support smaller farms, and we also need to support larger farms. Actually, it should be about what people do rather than, so I think those are some of the key things that we would be making sure is reflected, because that is what reflects the needs of the Scottish red meat supply chain, is what we're here to do.
And it's great. We've got the Cabinet Secretary of Rural Affairs, Mairi Gougeon, at the latter part of the episode today, is just going into a little bit more detail around the sort of policy changes, future support as well, which would be really interesting to delve more into those conversations. But Sarah, just to sort of finish on, very exciting. I know you've got the Make It Scotch Ambassador Network has got an update for us on that. And I know you've been really expanding your community outreach and engagement efforts within QMS. Can you share a little bit about an update on this?
Yeah, and actually this is another bit of a labour of love for the team, because again this kind of goes back to our new strategy, which we launched in 2020, June 2023. Then we had our kind of period of restructuring the organisation. So the first, we're still in the first year of delivery, and part of that first year of delivery, we've been building this new way of, we call it reputation, and this is obviously a space you're very familiar with, Claire, and your reputation is slightly different to the work that our marketing team do, which is about getting people to put Scotch Beef, Lamb and special side of pork into people's baskets. Reputation is about actually red meat being seen as a positive contributor to economy, society, environment and health. So our ambassador network is basically been the brainchild of Tracy Martin, who's now going to manage that whole stream of work. And it's about trying to get local people who know the red meat sector in their areas, giving them the tools to be able to talk up what we do. And as I've said, I don't know the best place or the best way to communicate to local people in Kintyre or up in Strathspey, because I don't live there. I don't know where the local high schools are, whereas local people in those communities do. So the ambassador network is basically designed to have local people in local communities talking up what we do and giving them the tools to be able to do that. So it's really, it's a different way of doing things for us, but we're really, really excited about it. It'll hopefully bring quite a few of our projects and programmes together, including things like the meat voucher scheme, which gives every local high school in Scotland up to £250 to spend on Scotch beef, Scotch lamb or specially selected pork. So it's just trying to put human faces to that contact, which hopefully means we can grow the positive reputation for the red meat sector in Scotland. You know, back to, I often say that, you know, we're the unsung hero of Scotland because we are part of Scotland's DNA, but we're often not good at talking up what we do. So it's trying to do a bit of that.
It sounds fantastic, Sarah, as does the QMS's version of Graham Norton. I'm sure everybody their ears were pricked hearing that. And it just sounds like you've got some amazing work happening across the country. And like you said, at a time where there is uncertainty in the industry, but things are very positive. We've got the sun shining, like you say, early sowing happening across the country. It's great to hear such positivity. And we're hearing a little bit more about that when we speak to Iain Macdonald next, who's I'm aware is going to have a positive market report for us as well. But thanks so much for your time, Sarah.
No problem, Claire. Thank you.
Next up, we hear from QMS's Market Intelligence Officer, Iain Macdonald. Iain, thanks for joining us again on the podcast. Can you begin by giving us a little bit of an overview of the monthly market outlook?
So yeah, at the moment, we're speaking at just 25th of March. I guess the key point in the cattle sector, just huge surge in prices for finished cattle and for store cattle. Fairly modest lift in the second half of the last year, but it was positive, and then just surging really right since the start of the year. And that's obviously made a massive difference to confidence in the sector, and it's almost sort of unprecedented levels of increase, and I don't think anyone could have predicted it. I've had that question, like, why have you not been able to predict it? And it's just almost if you sort of looked at the market fundamentals of where we've got to at the moment, you probably wouldn't have sort of put two and two together and got the price level we're at now. And that's, we've had fairly good levels of supply last year, 4% increase at UK level, so the market is kind of in theory well supplied going into this year. Slaughter numbers seem to have held up, certainly the price reporting abattoir, since the start of the year. We're sort of the seasonal high point for kill in the year, so that's the other thing. It's certainly not a kind of lack of supply on the market at the moment. I guess it suggests that demand is there, that's driving keeping those slaughter numbers coming through. Attractive prices are probably keeping those slaughter numbers up as well. From here, where do we go? I guess if you were looking ahead, you would think, well, seasonal supply is going to tighten a bit, so you would imagine that might support prices. But then, what's going to happen to demand? Because we've not really seen those kind of retail prices catch up yet.
But that's obviously, there's lots of positives in what you're saying, Iain, but I know there's a lot of concern right now about that longer term decline in the herd. But all the market signals are saying expand. What's your sort of message to producers, to listeners? What could really change this around?
Yeah, I think if you kind of look in, say, 10 years from now, we've got rising populations across the world, and it seems like production figures are kind of contracting in many areas. So that's a kind of a signal that it looks like it's a kind of positive period ahead for producers. That's the challenge is going to be to sort of supply that demand that's out there.
And how are retailers and processors responding to high farm gate prices? I mean, what impact is this having on producer margins?
Yeah, I'd imagine there's been quite a squeeze on margins in the processing sector so far, because just a huge surge, unprecedented surge in such a short period of time, and it's how those prices how quickly those kind of input costs for the sort of processing chain can then be passed on to their end buyers, and certainly at the retail it's kind of not really come through. The sort of retail price data is a little bit at a lag, so I think in January there was a sort of 3% year-on-year increase coming through. I imagine that will have continued in February and March, but we obviously don't have the data to show that yet. But over time, the kind of retail prices would tend to track what's happened at farm level. Way off that at the moment.
And just going back to, you're giving the monthly market outlook, and you've touched on the cattle side of things. How are things bearing up in the sheep sector?
Yeah, so in the sheep sector, it's been, I guess, a fairly flat market with some sort of ups and downs from week to week. Kind of prices hovering around 3.50 pence per kilo live weight in Scotland. That's kind of the high point, and it's been dipping a bit towards 3.30 some weeks. We've had Ramadan. It's kind of drawing to a close now, so that's sort of led to a little bit of a boost in prices this week. We had a bit of a boost at the sort of end of February as well. But yeah, there's not really been a significant rise this year. Like we saw last year, prices just kind of kept rising and rising and rising. I guess we had sort of Ramadan and Easter closer together last year. This year, Easter is still almost a month away, so that's potential for some support to prices in April. We've had a high carryover of hogs, so that's been weighing on the market. We had a slow start to the season, sharp reduction in production in the sort of first half of the season, and then those hogs are there now, weighing on the market.
And in the pig sector, Iain, what are some of the sort of key concerns to pig producers in the coming months, particularly in terms of global trade and input costs?
Yeah, so I think the sort of input cost side, it looks like the sort of volatility in trading patterns, it's maybe taken a bit of heat out of the grain market, and soya prices are maybe drifted up a little bit, but they're still they're kind of well down on where they were. So yeah, I think the sort of input cost side may be fairly positive. Obviously, labour will be a challenge, rising labour costs, but feed is maybe about sort of 2/3 of your cost of production in the pig sector, so that's fairly positive on that front. Prices have kind of come down last year, and then are maybe sort of 3-4% lower than last year at the moment, but I think there's still the sort of estimates of kind of cost of production is sort of below that farm gate price level at the moment, so it's fairly positive, and it looks like there's been a bit of expansion in production over the last year.
Wonderful, Iain. Sounds like generally all around a positive message going out to producers, and we look forward to having you on in a couple of months, and we'll get an update then on how things are progressing. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay, no problem.
We spoke to our final guest on today's programme a week before she announced she would be stepping down as an MSP ahead of next year's Hollywood election. I'm delighted to be joined by the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Land Reform and Islands, Mairi Gougeon, and QMS's Chair, Kate Rowell, on this month's podcast. Cabinet Secretary, I'm going to begin by asking you, what role do you see the Scottish meat sector playing in contributing to the nation's health, wealth and environment?
I think it has an absolutely crucial role across all of those areas, because I think we produce livestock in Scotland, we produce it really well, and we want that to continue in a sustainable way well into the future. So for me, it has such a critical role to play when it comes to how we're adapting to climate change, to the nature crises that we face as well. But also, I mean, in Scotland, we do have significant public health challenges. And there was a piece of work that was done by Food Standards Scotland that was considering that and looking at the diet across all sorts of age groups. And it's like, well, we know that some people can consume well over what they should be. We also know there's a significant part of the population in Scotland that isn't getting all the nutrients that it needs. So we think that the consumption of red meat, of course, and I think all the nutrition from that is really critical. And like anything, it's the balance in all of this. I think that's where the work that we're taking forward in government through the Good Food Nation plan and what we're trying to set out through that really pulls all these different strands of food policy together in the one place. And it's about considering it all in the round rather than us all working in silos. So about how we are tying together all the different issues that we're facing in public health, how we're also trying to tackle the climate and nature crises, and look at general sustainability all round. And I think that, well, right now we're in the place where we're developing our first Good Food Nation plan for Scotland that will hopefully bring all that together and I think set us on a good track as we go forward into the future. And I think we are doing a lot of good work in Scotland just now at the moment, but of course there's always improvements that can be made. So I think the Good Food Nation plan will set us in the right direction for that. And also intertwined with that, I mean, we passed last year in the Scottish Parliament the Agriculture and Rural Communities Scotland Act, which is about the framework for future agricultural support in Scotland. And again, that's about how we really support our farmers and our crofters right across the country in the really important job that they do in producing food, but doing that in a way that works for climate and nature as well.
And I think that point around balance is something we're definitely going to pick up as the episode goes on, Cabinet Secretary. But you've obviously mentioned a couple of things there about the Good Food Nation bill and obviously some of the important announcements we obviously had last year. Can you share a little bit about some of the current and the up-and-coming agricultural policy direction and how it's feeding into shaping the future of the red meat sector?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think one thing, I just touched on in my first response there about the really positive vision that we have for agriculture in Scotland, but also for our red meat sector too. We know that there is huge demand for what we produce in Scotland. And again, I've said it is really important for, how we tackle the climate and nature challenges that we have too. And for me, it's not, I think sometimes those different areas can be construed as if they're in conflict, which for me they're not. I think if we want to continue to produce food and to do that well, then we need to make sure that we're also tackling those other challenges. So it's not a case of one or the other. I think all three of those pillars are really important. And that's really what we're trying to do with agricultural support, is really take us another step forward to the positive vision that we have for agriculture in Scotland. We want to become a world leader in sustainable and regenerative agriculture, of which livestock and red meat production is a critically important part of that. We want to give that confidence to the sector as well going forward into the future. So we've published a route map. So what that sets out is when all the key changes are going to be made to current support, or when we can expect that to change, when more information will become available for farmers and crofters too. But we have also tried to provide more certainty where we can. So we have the voluntary coupled support scheme, which we've set out will continue until at least 2028, when it could then become part of the future framework of support. But we know we can't wait for some of these changes to be made. And that's why we denounced conditions that we're applying to some support at the moment. And what we're trying to do with that is really ensure that businesses are operating as efficiently as possible, but they're also encouraged to, look at their own business baseline. How are they performing in relation to, doing carbon audits, soil tests, animal health and welfare plans, and really looking at their own business level and taking advice on the back of that. So we had applied conditions to the suckler beef support scheme. So we'd introduce a calving interval there. Again, it's about that efficiency point and supporting businesses in that way. But we're also providing support for people to really build the foundations of what will be a whole farm plan. So we're providing funding to help with carbon audits, soil tests, animal health and welfare plans, so that, just as I was saying, people can really start to develop that baseline for their own business to see how they can move forward from there. And I think it's really important that we incentivise that and encourage that where we can going forward.
And of course, the future of the red meat sector is contingent really on the support and engagement of the next generation. And I guess my question to you is, are there sort of strategies that are being explored with the Scottish Government to look at how you can encourage the next generation of farmers, of butchers, of processors in the red meat sector?
You're absolutely right, because I think it's that whole supply chain that is absolutely critical, and where we know there are skills shortages at the moment anyway. I think we have a job to do in terms of showing how, I think, all the opportunities that exist right across that supply chain. And because I think, that's one thing I love about my job, getting to meet with farmers, seeing the processors and the work that they do, as well as our butchers too. And I think there are some really exciting career opportunities there for people. But we know that there are challenges when it comes to either new entrants or the next generation of farmers. So the First Minister actually announced at the NFU Scotland AGM just a couple of weeks ago that we'd be holding a summit for new entrants in the next generation. And we're really looking to include the banks as part of that conversation as well, to be like, what are the challenges you guys are facing, and what is ultimately going to help you move forward? Because we want to work with them to try and get solutions that we know are going to work for them as well. But we do also have some really good schemes that are underway at the moment in terms of helping our next generation and new entrants look for new opportunities. We have the Scotch Land Matching Service. We have the pre-apprenticeship programme that we run with the machinery rings as well, which is really getting new people into the sector and showing them some of the opportunities that exist there. We also have the the Small Producers Pilot Fund as well. With that, we're providing support to some of the processors across Scotland, because we know that they face challenges too. And that's really about listening to what our small producers need and helping provide that support. So I think we have got a number of initiatives underway right now, but it's really how we work with the sector to try and address some of those challenges that's going to be important.
And Kate, I'm going to bring you in there, because I know Quality Meat Scotland has been highlighting the Butcher's Apprenticeship. It's been Scottish Apprenticeship Week. Can you share a little bit how the interest and uptake of careers within the red meat sector with young people has changed over the last few years?
So yeah, we support the apprenticeship. We work very closely with the Scottish Craft Butchers for that, and it is something which I think at the moment is actually oversubscribed. There's more people wanting to do it than there are places available. Which is good, but we could do with more places available. Part of the work that the Scottish Red Meat Resilience Group have been looking at is to do with skills and education, and I know our team are actually in the process of developing a sort of comms plan. They're doing a lot of research to find out what kind of words resonate with people when they're looking at their careers. What kind, not necessarily saying, do you want to be a farmer, but do you want to work with animals? Do you want to work outside? That sort of, see which sort of language it is that really hooks people in, so that we can then build that into a comms plan and try and involve as many people, because we don't provide the training, but to try and help signpost people that way as much as possible. So it's a really, really important part of the future. We need lots of young people and older people to come into the sector as well, not just young people, because it's such a great place to work, and we're doing everything we can to try and support that.
And I was thinking ahead of this podcast, I was looking at dates, and I realised that Cabinet Secretary, you joined government in 2018. You then became Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs in 2021. Kate, you became chair of QMS also in 2018. So I guess
we've grown up together.
I know.
So I've been following both of your roles within the sector, and I guess my question to you both is, during that time, like how has your relationship and I guess some of the highlights that you've experienced working with the rural community, how has that shaped the role that you've been carrying out, and maybe sort of your relationship or your view on rural Scotland? I'll start with you first, Cabinet Secretary.
Oh, it's absolutely. I think shaped how I have developed in this role as well. I represent a rural constituency, Angus North and Mearns, but I don't necessarily come from a farming background. But I think it's just, and that's what, again, I'm so lucky in this job, because I've had the opportunity to see so much across Scotland, to visit different farmers and crofters, but actually not just across Scotland. I think, QMS do such an amazing job when it comes to showcasing the red meat sector. And I've had the opportunity to attend some of the trade shows with them as well, like at Nuga and at Sile. And I think it's always interesting to see how others perceive you as well. And that's been fantastic to see. But I think it's just one thing that just strikes me, I think, across the whole supply chain actually, is just the real genuine passion that people have. They care about the food that they produce, the land that they're looking after. And, it's really instilled that passion and drive for me, because I think that ultimately you come into this kind of job because you really want to help make things better generally, for people in my own constituency, but right across Scotland. And I'm really lucky that I'm in the position that we try and do that. And of course, the only way that we can hope to either implement policies that are going to work for people on the ground is if we work alongside them. And it's been really important for me, I think, meeting so many different shapes, sizes of farms and croft businesses, hearing about how they operate, what they need to see, the direction of travel that they want to go in, and the type of support that they need going forward as well, because it's it underpins our whole rural economy, and it's a way of life as well. So it's really important for me that ultimately we want to get our future policy right. We want that confidence for people for producing food and going forward too. So undoubtedly it's shaped so much of what I do in this role. And it's also been really exciting to see, I think, some of the new and emerging sectors that have come through all of that. And I touched a bit earlier on the Good Food Nation work that we're taking forward, but there are so many opportunities through the likes of agritourism, which Sarah Millar's been really instrumental in driving in Scotland, because that's about connecting people with food. And I think that's something I'm really passionate about as well, because I think as consumers, we have been a bit dissociated as, to where our food comes from. And I think agritourism offers so many opportunities there to get people out on farm, to see how their food is produced, to meet the people that are doing that and really develop that passion for it as well. And I think the more we can do to connect that, I mean, RET obviously do brilliant work too in terms of getting school children out on farms and giving them that experience. But I think that, those are some really key areas that I'm passionate about.
We had Martin Kennedy on last month's podcast, and he was telling us that his next venture moving forward is going to be exploring agritourism. So that's for the former president of NFU Scotland. So that was his big thing that he was talking about, and he wanted to look at that sort of what you're saying, that connecting role, that engaging more with the public. So, which is interesting. Kate, yourself, 2018, you became chair of QMS Scotland. What have been some of the highlights that have influenced the role that you perform?
Yeah, so coming in, obviously I've been a farmer all my life, farmer and a vet all my life, so I knew that end of the supply chain, but didn't really know the rest of it at all. And it was a real eye-opener for me to learn all about the whole supply chain, right through processors, butchers, everybody else's work. You get this really broad overview of the whole supply chain, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's been great to go out to places like Paris and Cologne to the trade shows and roundabout. But as a farmer, the main thing I like doing is nosying about other people's farms. So it's really the farm visits that really do it for me. I absolutely love it. And as a past monitor farmer, the monitor farm visits are always my real highlight. I just love meeting people. I love speaking to people and chatting and like the Cabinet Secretary says, hearing their passion. They all feel the same as I do about their own farm and about their own animals and their own business. And it's just great to get that from people and to think that hopefully you're trying to work somehow to help what they're doing, help make it easier, help make it more profitable. And we have such a good relationship with all our stakeholders at QMS, all the different parts of the sector, the unions, all the other organisations, government. And the thing maybe that surprised me more than anything was how much esteem the public hold us in. So when you actually go out and meet people who haven't got anything to do with the sector, they really are interested in farmers and farming and food. And that is something that maybe as a farmer you don't always realise. So that's really good as well.
Cabinet Secretary, looking ahead to the sort of next 5 years, what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities and maybe challenges that are facing the red meat sector?
Well, I think there are a number of challenges at the moment, and I think some of those that we're seeing quite a lot of at the moment is the risk of animal disease. I think, we've seen the cases of foot and mouth disease in Germany, there's blue tongue, there's been a number of different concerns around that. We are obviously aware of all these threats and our teams work really hard to manage that and obviously try and prevent that as far as possible. But I think obviously with the changing climate and how we are seeing things develop there, I think that's one thing that, is this a sign of things to come for the future where we're going to see more of these threats? That could well be the case. So it's really important that we're prepared for that as well. But also, I think another key challenge too is obviously we've seen the decline in cattle numbers. I know that QMS have done a tremendous amount of work looking at that, and we are keen to work with them to see, to have further discussions around that as well. Because like I say, our red meat and our livestock sector is so important. It's hugely important for us going forward. So we want to make sure that it's sustainable going forward too. So really how we can try and work together to tackle some of the issues around that. But I mean, like anything though, as much as we can see these challenges and that can be quite worrying, there are also, I think, so many opportunities for the sector as well. I talked about some of the shows that I've been to before, there is such huge demand for what we produce in Scotland. I think because of the quality, because of the provenance, and again, QMS do some, fantastic work, and their team there in terms of showcasing that. So I think that, and again, we've tried to set out with our support that we want to support our livestock sector going forward. We're trying to give as much certainty as we can in relation to some of the support schemes that we have there, so that people have that confidence to invest. And we also want to provide those opportunities to the next generation going forward as well. And that's where we're keen that people see those opportunities that exist, that they continue to invest and they continue to enter the sector, because I think that's going to be really important.
And of course, one of the challenges recently has been, since the UK budget was announced last year, it's being a trying time for farmers. What is the Scottish Government doing to really look at repairing some of the confidence and supporting the red meat sector? Like, you've identified some of the challenges, and to rebuild that confidence is really key as part of that conversation.
You're absolutely right, and that's where it is really frustrating that we've seen those changes introduced by the UK government, because I think it's just really pulled the rug out from under people as well. And unfortunately, we're not in a position where we can change that in Scotland, but we are trying to press the UK government to think again on what they've introduced, and particularly in relation to the inheritance tax, because from some of the analysis that we've seen and undertaken, it just doesn't match up to, I think, what they've been basing their figures on. But it's not just the inheritance tax changes. I mean, one thing that we're really concerned about is also the budget and the way that that's changed now. So obviously, as members of the EU, we had a ring-fence budget for 7 years. We could plan ahead for that. Since we left the EU, we've been getting annual budgets, which makes it really difficult for government, let alone for our farmers and crofters going forward. But at least, when we first left the EU, we had ring fence funding, but all that has changed with this recent budget. The ring fence has been removed. The budget will be subject to the Barnett formula as well, which is based on the population level rather than being area based, which obviously benefits Scotland in that sense. So we're really concerned about what some of those changes will mean for us for the budget going forward. But again, we are just trying to work with the sector and really try and provide as much certainty and confidence as we can within what is an ever-changing political environment. We can see that especially over the last few weeks, and just how dramatically and quickly everything can change. But so while we're trying to get the UK government to think again, we are still trying to work with the sector and really just trying to make the best of things as we can with the budgets that we have available.
And Cabinet Secretary, at the beginning, I think it was one of your first answers, you talked about the balance in terms of whether that's in food production, environmental custodianship. I know I mentioned I spoke to Martin Kennedy last month. He was always very passionate about saying, farmers are food producers, but they're also environmental custodians. Mm-hmm. I mean, for yourself, how does the Scottish Government, how does it balance that approach to improving biodiversity and climate change mitigation, but also supporting food security in rural economies?
Oh, absolutely. And just as I said at the start, I mean, for me, there is absolutely no contradiction between producing food and doing that in a way that works for climate and nature. And again, from travelling the country and seeing the amazing work that farmers are doing, there are so many people that are already doing that. And I think that for me, that's ultimately what we're trying to incentivise. And I think Kate touched on earlier, the monitor farms, I think, are so important in terms of, businesses with that peer-to-peer learning, which I think is so important, and people seeing, being able to speak to other farmers about what's working for their business, and being able to share that knowledge and expertise, I think is really important. And that's why we've been really proud to support the Monitor Farm Network, because I think that does so much good work. So again, for me, there's no contradiction, and it's about how it's not about that either or. It's about how we can integrate these different things. I mean, again, there's, farms that I visited where they're integrating trees into their business, which is, proven to be of benefit for the health and welfare of their livestock as much as being good for the environment too. So it's about how we can better integrate some of these different land uses, and encourage that. And I think what I also find is that certainly from some of the businesses that you go and see, I think it also, what tends to be good for the environment tends to be good from a business point of view as well, which I think is obviously really important, because we want to make sure that businesses are efficient and that they're profitable.
both of you earlier, when you were mentioning some of your highlights working within the sector, you commented on some of the big events and conferences that you've attended, really showcasing the Scottish red meat sector. I think in Cabinet Secretary you mentioned CIAL. Kate, I know you and I spoke on the podcast before about the huge trade show in Paris, and I know recently that QMS had a team out at Gulf Foods looking at the kind of Scotch Lamb entering new markets. I guess it'd be interesting to hear what your reflections from both of you are in terms of where the Scottish red meat brands sit in terms of international reputation. What are the responses? And in your opinion, Cabinet Secretary first, what do you think really sets aside Scotch meat on the world stage?
Yeah, no, that's where I'm really grateful to QMS, first of all, for all the work that they do. But I think in terms of the showcase that they do for the Scottish industry out at these events, because it is always so amazing, just as I touched on earlier, getting that perception of how others view you and what you produce, as well as then getting the opportunity to see what's happening elsewhere in the world, because obviously there are some really big producers out there, and again, I don't think that Scotland would ever compete with some of the higher quantity volumes, but where we really do, and I think where you hear that from everybody when you're at these shows, is really what sets us apart, is the quality of the red meat that comes from Scotland, and that does seem to be really well recognised. And again, I think that's down to the work that goes into the Scotch brand. I think it's held in such high esteem because of the quality, the provenance, and obviously that whole life assurance that is given for red meat, which I think really sets us apart from some of the others.
And Kate, of course, you've attended lots of these huge events. And what's the sort of response that you're getting, and where does the Scotch brand really sit on the world stage?
Yeah, so it was amazing to me, as a wee farmer in the borders, to go out to these far-flung places. I've been to Japan, I've been in the US, and people have heard of Scotch Beef and Scotch Lamb. They've heard of it and they know it's really good quality. And we were in Japan. There hadn't been British meat in Japan for 25 years post BSE. And we went out there when it was allowed back in, and the importers knew they wanted Scotch Beef and Scotch Lamb. That's what they knew they wanted, even after all that time. The traceability, the food safety, and the taste are all really, really high up on their wish list. I wasn't out at Gulf Foods just recently, but I know Gordon from our team was, and he came back absolutely buzzing for the amount of opportunity that there is out there. He was really on a high about it. He said there is so much potential out there for Scotch Lamb, and if we can help our exporters get into the markets there, then that'll be a real win. And I mean, our biggest market is still Europe. That's still where most of our meat goes, and so CIAL and Anuga in Cologne are both such important places to go. And at CIAL in October, the Cabinet Secretary will agree with me, we were inundated with people coming onto the stand looking for meat, and really, if we could fulfil all those orders, that would be absolutely fantastic. And that's why we need to produce more good quality meat going forward, and put that confidence into the farmers who are breeding it out there on the ground.
Well, I'm gonna wrap up the interview by asking you both something a bit light and a bit fun. I'm gonna ask you, Cabinet Secretary, first to share a favourite, either Scotch beef, Scotch lamb, or specially selected pork dish. So you've got no time to think about it, and then you do, Kate. Then I'll come to you.
No, well, actually, right? Can I be cheeky? I'm actually going to pick my favourite of them all. I think a slow cooked beef cheek, absolutely up there. I love a shoulder of lamb just in the oven, bit of salt, that's it, slow cooked, I think is absolutely amazing. And a Bruce Brimer pork sausage, absolutely can't beat it.
Amazing. And Kate, what about yourself?
I'm going to do exactly the same and do all three, just so that I don't offend anybody. One of the best things I ever ate was out at CIAL. Our chefs did a belly pork taster. It was absolutely gorgeous, and I didn't think I liked belly pork before then, but since then, if there's ever belly pork on the menu, I have it. It's wonderful. at our last Monitor Farm meeting, we quite a while ago, we had a hog roast van, but it wasn't a pig, it was at one of our own lambs that they did, and we had pulled lamb with mint sauce on rolls. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And I must say, I do like a fillet steak. I know that's maybe, I know everybody else says ribeyes and sirloins, but I really like a fillet steak with a lovely a Scotch beef fillet steak with lovely Diane sauce. That's my
It's a ribeye
go-to.
all the way. A ribeye, absolutely.
I'm a ribeye too, but I do love a fillet. Oh gosh, what amazing recipes. I'm sure everybody listening is lots of agreement happening. But just thank you both so much for your time today. We've covered so much ground in the last 25 minutes. And Cabinet Secretary, it's so great to have you on the podcast and sharing an update and what's been happening. And now you've got such a busy schedule. So for making the time, thank you. And Kate, you're back on the podcast. You can't get rid of me. So thank you again for your time. And we'll have you back in soon and we'll hear all about your lambing in that naughty tub. Thank you for tuning in to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen for more monthly episodes as we continue to explore the vital topics affecting the red meat industry. If you want to stay updated with the latest news in our sector, be sure to sign up for the weekly QMS newsletter by emailing info@qmsscotland.co.uk. Join us next time for more insights from experts, farmers and industry leaders. But until then, stay connected with us on our social channels and keep up with the latest news from Quality Meat Scotland.